A routine traffic stop on a registered sex offender uncovered a phone filled with child pornography. And inside that phone, police say they found videos of a woman, 26-year-old Cassie Snay, performing sexual acts with a dog. According to the probable cause affidavit, she confessed to it, admitting to police that she sent the videos and committed the acts. But now, after that confession, Snay is offering a bizarre defense. We're on the case presented by Law&Crime. I'm Chris Stewart. Hey guys, real quick before we begin, if you are looking for a deal on the perfect gift, I want you to see the Meet Chef IQ Sense Smart Meat Thermometer. It is the secret to stress-free, flawless cooking, whether you're a seasoned chef or someone like me, you're just starting out trying to survive. The smart thermometer can guarantee perfect results every time. So no more guessing and no more overcooking. So what you do, you insert the probe. You can see they come like this. You select your food, cooking method, and preferred doneness. Then just relax. Your app alerts you when it's time to flip, remove, or rest. Perfect food every time. From holiday turkey to prime rib, wings, brisket, and salmon. It works for ovens, grills, smokers, fryers, whatever you need. You cannot mess this up. It is the gift that makes cooking stress-free and fun. With my code OTC, you can save 30% off site-wide at chefiq.com. A massive child pornography investigation in Indiana has led police to a separate, stomach-turning discovery. Video evidence allegedly showing a woman committing bestiality with a family dog. 26-year-old Cassie Snay now faces felony charges of bestiality, according to a probable cause affidavit obtained by Law&Crime. The shocking allegations emerged from the phone of a convicted child molester, where detectives were sorting through 69,000 images and 11,000 videos of child sexual abuse material, and they say that they found video of Snay engaging in a graphic sexual act with a black and tan canine. But in the wake of her arrest, Snay isn't just denying it. She's offering a defense that's as bizarre as, frankly, the crime itself. Now, we've reviewed the court documents and her statements, and the details inside are as explicit as they are disturbing, so I'll give you that warning. And this is not the kind of crime that we cover all that often. This starts back in December of last year. It's with a man named Trey Mettler. Now, Mettler, according to a probable cause affidavit, is a registered sex offender, specifically classified as a sexually violent predator. That's based on a 2014 child molesting conviction. But that 2014 conviction was just the beginning of a long criminal record. Public court filings reveal a consistent pattern of Mettler failing to comply with the requirements of the sex offender registry. We pulled the records. He was convicted for failing to register in 2022, again in 2023, and once more in early 2025. The affidavit states that in December of 2024, the Wells County Sheriff's Office in Indiana opened an investigation because Mettler had allegedly failed to update his address, which is a crime for someone on that registry. In January of this year, the affidavit states a detective pulled Mettler over, arrested him for that failure to register, and got a warrant to search his car. Inside, police say they found drugs, paraphernalia, and 2 cell phones. One of them, an iPhone 14 in a red case. Now, that stop led to a new set of felony charges for Mettler. According to court documents, he was immediately charged not just with the failure to register, but also with possession of methamphetamine, a narcotic drug, and most critically for the investigation that would follow, possession of child pornography. The affidavit alleges the phone was a vault of child sexual abuse material containing what police describe as 69,000 images and 11,000 videos of CSAM, now accessed through apps like Telegram, Snapchat, and Kik. But in the middle of that massive, horrific collection, investigators say they started seeing photos and videos of a woman who they actually recognized, 26-year-old Cassie Snay. The affidavit states that Snay and Mettler had an on-again, off-again relationship. Police say they found material that appeared to show Snay at her home in Fort Wayne, Indiana. And one video, in particular, according to the detective's sworn statement, is why Cassie Snay is now sitting in an Allen County jail charged with 2 counts of bestiality. Now, according to the affidavit, after identifying numerous photos and videos of Cassie Snay on the iPhone, the investigator reviewed them. He then provided a detailed list of evidence which forms the basis for the 2 counts of bestiality. The affidavit lists them by forensic tag. While the descriptions in the document are extremely graphic, they allege a pattern of sexual acts involving Snay and a family dog. The document states that the first incident was recorded on January 17, 2024, and describes a video where Snay is engaged in a sexual act with a black and tan canine. But the document details many more. It alleges a series of additional videos and photos with creation dates spanning from January through October of 2024. According to the affidavit, these files depict Snay engaging in various sexual activities with the same dog, this black and tan canine that she later identified by name. The acts described include the dog performing sexual acts on her and her performing sexual acts on the dog, and sexually explicit behavior during video calls. This is not an easy story to talk about. Now, the document states that, according to GPS data from one file, an alleged act took place at a Motel 6. Crucially, the affidavit states that on September 19, 2025, the detective conducted a recorded Mirandized interview with Cassie Snay. Quoting directly from the conclusion of the affidavit, quote, "During the interview, Snay admitted to committing these crimes, including making and sending these photos and videos to Mettler via cell phone. Snay admitted her canine Coda and Claws were the dogs in all of the videos and photos, but Coda is the only dog she engaged in sexual behavior with." Now, it further states that she admitted the acts occurred in Allen County at her mom's residence or a Motel 6. So the affidavit's case is built on this chain. A sex offender investigation leads to a phone containing a vast library of child sexual abuse material. Within it, investigators found a series, they say, of explicit videos and photos depicting Snay in sexual acts with a dog. Finally, the document states that she confessed it all in a police interview. This combination of digital evidence and a purported confession confirms the probable cause for her arrest. But that's not where this story ends. After that recorded interview, Snay began offering a very different explanation for the videos. She has spoken out publicly, claiming the acts seen in the videos were not what they appeared to be. In posts and messages reviewed by Law&Crime, Snay has put forward a bizarre defense, shifting the blame entirely on to Trey Mettler, claiming that she was coerced through violence. In one exchange in a Facebook comment section, she writes, quote, "I'd love to explain and show the world he beat me for this S word. When asked directly, are you saying he was forcing you to do that? Snay replies, quote, yes, I'm Ben gathers so much proof. I'm so sorry to everyone I ever let him hurt me into this expletive, but I'll prove my way, I promise, end quote. In another comment, she reiterates the claim of force, writing, quote, forced to, I got, expletive beat, and so much more. But that defense has been met with immediate and blunt skepticism, even online. One person responded directly to her claims, stating, quote, you could have quite literally got him arrested for domestic and went to a victim's advocate if you had proof of anything. Nobody forced you to stay. Nobody forced you to mess with animals. Snay was formally charged on December 9th with 2 counts of bestiality, each classified as a level 6 felony in Indiana. According to the publicly available court docket, she was arrested on a warrant, made her initial appearance in Allen Superior Court on December 15th, and the court found probable cause to proceed with the case. At that hearing, records show the court appointed a public defender to represent her and released her from custody under a form of monitored conditional release while the case is pending. Joining us now to talk a little bit more about this case is animal advocate and journalist Paul Mueller. Thanks for being with us here on Law&Crime. I had a really tough time just reading through this case for pretty obvious reasons. You do a lot of work when it comes to animal abuse, and bestiality is a tough read, to say the least. It's a tough reality. I mean, how common are cases like this?
It's more common than people think. Even I, having worked with animals for a majority of my career, having advocated for animals while doing television news, 30 years, you know what? I saw the cases in the beginning decades ago, and I didn't think much to them. I didn't think much of them 30 years ago because, I didn't hear about them so often. But more and more, especially with people being online, we see more and more of these cases actually being reported. A lot of people don't actually believe a lot of people don't believe that bestiality is a thing. I mean, there are so many cases that are out there that we just don't know about. I mean, I see them on social media, but they don't get the attention that this case might. Just because there's no high profile, there's no child involved, it's just, and it could just be an animal advocate saying, oh, that this is happening and not necessarily have the proof. But it's a sickening and it's a shocking crime, and it's just one more crime against the animal where the animal cannot speak, cannot use their voice, and, they're just being taken advantage of.
And you look at how authorities found this woman. She's apparently in this on and off again relationship with a man who just sounds like a monster in and of itself, a registered sex offender who doesn't seem to be following the rules of the court, and he has allegedly 70,000 roughly files of child sex abuse material, and then it's through that they're able to find these videos showing the alleged bestiality that this woman was doing. What do you make of that part of it? That was kind of through this very disturbing investigation that it opens the door. I don't know if fortunately is the word, but they're actually able to find the evidence that this was actually going on.
Once again, a case that may not have been discovered had it not been for them getting onto his phone and seeing these images, allegedly seeing these images. Again, it's a case of bestiality, and we typically, I think, as a society, kind of have a really hard time dealing with it. I mean, just to even bring it up in a conversation. When's the last time you've really talked about that, even though you cover crime, right?
Right.
It's something that a lot of people don't want to talk about, just put it under the radar, if you will. But it's there, and it's happening. And in a case like this, again, I think it's because of detectives wanting to get the guy, because he was, on the run. He didn't register as a sex offender, and I think it was a good thing that they actually found this, because there we go. We can have a discussion about it like we're having right now, even though it's one of those tough discussions that nobody really wants to take part in because of the topic, because of what actually or allegedly happened.
Right, and I mean, I think of even, putting this story together, and, we talk about, anybody who's watching us now on Law and Crime, that we cover stories that are really tough to talk about, but this is one where it's like I found my voice almost lowering as if I was to a whisper, because it's just so disturbing to think about. And it's disturbing on the point where we're talking about child sex abuse material involving human beings, but then also on the fact that it's the animal part of it. There's this crossover, incredibly disturbing. In your work, when it comes to animal abuse, whether it's someone physically assaulting an animal, a bestiality case like this, how often do you see that crossover between human victims, maybe a child, and then sadly, like in this case also, we have animals who are victims?
I think many of the abuse cases start out with, and the studies show this, is that it starts with that defendant being abused themselves. The studies show that people who abuse animals, it's a vicious cycle, that they have been abused and then they go ahead and abuse in their lifetime. And what is it that a person can do that they won't get caught doing, or what can they do where what can they do where the victim can't speak up? This is a perfect opportunity, sadly, for animal abusers to get their first taste, if you will, and I don't mean to use that, but it's a first opportunity for these animal abusers to get the first taste of, can I do this? Can I go ahead? And they're not thinking, can I go ahead in this vicious abuse cycle? They're thinking, I was abused, so therefore I need to do this, and it just goes on and on and on down the line. And you think about it from animals, then the next step would be people. Would be children. I mean, it's sadly, it's one step to the next, and that's the problem. That's the big problem. And in a case like this, it's great, I think, that the investigators work so hard, and I think they work so hard, like I said earlier, because of the fact that there are children involved. One of the things that we don't talk about enough is, like we said, don't talk about bestiality, and we don't necessarily talk about the abuse of animals, because oftentimes, animals are viewed as property, right? Animals are viewed as property. So the fact that they can't speak out, and there are people like myself who see my Rottweiler as my four-legged daughter. right? Other people would not see it that way. It's just a dog. No, it's not just a dog. And that's why our fight is so hard, because we have to stand up for those, those innocent beings that, can't, stand up for themselves and speak. But in this case, because he's this convicted, child sex offender, the law needs to stand up for those children. That's the point here. The law knows that they need to stand up for those kids who were found, or the video on that phone. They need to stand up for these, for the victims of sexual abuse. Whereas with animals, it's a topic, again, that we don't talk about. So therefore, there's not necessarily the prosecution angle to it. But here, I think it is happening, just because it also involves child abuse.
And it is, I feel like animal abuse, and this is the world that you often investigate. Yeah. There's so many animal abuse cases, and not even just bestiality cases, just animal abuse cases that happen. You search it on Google, and multiple will come up sometimes every day, it feels like.
Yes.
I was looking at your page, and we'll talk about some of the work you do in a moment, but it just seems like there's a lot of suspended sentences, a lot of plea deals, a lot of times where you would read a report like this, and we don't know what the verdict will be if she ends up being found guilty and all of that, but it seems like there's a lot of times where you just feel like the sentence is light, or it doesn't feel like justice was served. How would you assess how the legal system, when it comes to animal abuse cases, how it really applies to the animal, just animal victims?
I think we have made some progress, not a lot, not as much as we should. But when there are victories, when a person is sentenced, when they get a couple of years, right? When there are victories, meaning they're not given a slap on the wrist, that is something to celebrate. A lot of people say, no, we wanted more time. We wanted them to get a harsher conviction. The thing is, we have to take those victories and realize, yep, we got this case, and now we can use this case and move forward with that. We can use this, as an example to say, hey, this happened here. This person was convicted for this animal crime. Let's go and move on to the next case and try and use that momentum. Sadly, that doesn't often work. Because it's not, when we talk about animal abuse, we talk about law enforcement, we talk about, the prosecuting, the district attorneys, and then we just talk about the animal abusers themselves, because oftentimes animal advocates, we are up against all of those people. We have the vested interest of the animal at heart. Oftentimes, law enforcement or, prosecuting district attorneys don't necessarily have that, because they've got other bigger cases. They have bigger fish to fry, the people, right? This is how often it happens, where they've got to hand out justice. They've got to, deliver justice for kids, for adults, for people. And the animals seem to always fall a couple of steps below. I think we're making strides, but we also have to think about, there are 10,000 dogs each and every year, at least, are shot and killed by law enforcement. 10,000, right? One just happened in St. Clair County, Michigan. And the thing is, the one thing that a law enforcement officer has to say, and the only thing, I was in fear for my life. That's it. I was in fear for my life. There was a very interesting story recently, and I had covered this since the beginning. His name was Teddy, and he was a senior Shih Tzu, blind and deaf, Chris, blind and deaf, and he was shot and killed by a Sturgeon, Missouri police officer. He was in fear for his life with a blind and deaf Shih Tzu, Chris. So here's the deal. The one time when viewing a dog, an animal, as property comes into play, because they sued, Teddy's dog dad and the lawyer sued the city of Sturgeon, Missouri, as well as Myron Woodson, the former officer, and they settled for $500,000. Now, no amount of money is going to bring Teddy, the dog, back. But, this is a substantial victory in the case that, they were saying you violated Teddy's dog dad's rights. The Fourth Amendment, you messed with his stuff. And the judge believed it. It has happened before where, there have been convictions or there have been settlements, Fourth Amendment, that's my dog. That's my stuff, if you want to technically say it's my stuff in the legal world, right? So you mess with my stuff, you might have to pay. And what's interesting too, Chris, is who's going to pay for that $500,000 settlement? The taxpayers, the people, because the officer and the city who backed him up, they failed.
Yeah.
That might be a good case to look into. Have you heard about that?
No, I haven't. And I think that kind of speaks to like what we're talking about with like animal victims, because, certainly in those cases where there is a perhaps controversial police shooting, I mean, that is something that is on the news very regularly. But then when you talk about an animal, very similar situation, but we're talking about a dog instead of a human, it's not something that gets the type of attention, which kind of speaks to, in cases like this one, involving Snay in Indiana or wherever it may be, they don't get as much attention, and maybe they don't lead to the type of changes without, the headline news and pressure on a lawmaker to make sure that someone, is held to the farthest end of the law. Right. Do you feel like I think of social media, and in this case, Snapchat is accused of, or not being accused, but that's where some of these child sex abuse images were on, and then that leads to some of the bestiality images. And you have, it seems like that's very hardcore evidence for prosecutors. I have a picture of you doing something like this. At the same time, it feels like that also, now these images are being shared. So it's not just the act, but then there's the act of perhaps bestiality being shared within the child sex abuse material, that's going around. Do you find, I guess, how do you, in your work, see social media play a role? On one hand, unfortunately, with the acts that are being spread, but at the same time, it seems like it can be incredibly solid evidence for a prosecutor to have in going after someone like this woman who's accused of doing this. Yeah, well, the thing is, too, I think social media is a great tool for advocacy work. I'm not a big fan of social media, especially not going into the comment section, Chris, but, all right? But you know what? As far as animal advocacy goes, it's our main platform to speak up. More and more so these days, we're seeing more and more cases. And that is, are we seeing more and more cases because it's happening more, or are we seeing more and more cases because there are more cameras everywhere and we've got social media? Social media, we have these call to actions where we can get people involved from all around the country, all around the world. I've worked on these call to actions before where we try to get justice. We work to get justice for these animals. And, the problem is that, we have to keep pushing and pushing and pushing, unlike the 24-hour news cycle, like we talked about that dog in Missouri. Unlike the 24-hour news cycle, you and I both know, having covered local television news, that we do that story, we may do an update down the line. But what I've found, though, in many of the cases that I've covered is that the news has also covered it, but traditionally there has been no follow-up. People love to say, oh, let's tag the news stations, right? But the thing is, sure, that's great for awareness, but that story will slowly die down. So it's in the social media realm that we keep it alive, and more animal advocates will connect, will get together, so that we can, fight together and not not know about what's happening, if that makes sense. I think of the victim in this story, sadly, this dog, and what happens in these types of cases to this animal, so now going forward.
Yeah, and that's the saddest part. I feel bad. Of course I feel bad for the victims, the innocent young children, right? But at the same time, the dog, she had two dogs, right? The dogs will usually land in the pound, if you'll call it, or the local shelter. They'll be used as evidence, and it's typical that the dogs will be held as evidence while the court case plays out. And once that's done, once the case has been resolved, typically then, hopefully, they'll have a forever home waiting for the animal. That's the thing. Some people say, oh, they, in the shelter. The shelter is better than being involved in the acts that were alleged to, have taken place. But, a lot of times, especially with high-profile cases, the dog, whatever animal it may be, will then, by that time, by the case is over, they'll have someone lined up for their forever family, or at least for a foster, and as they try and search for the family, for a really good adopter.
And you hope that these dogs end up in just the perfect place for them after everything that, according to law enforcement, that they have been through. Paul Mueller, journalist, animal advocate. Thank you for coming on Law&Crime. You do some really important work that people can find on social media. I know you have a YouTube page, Instagram as well. Where can people find what you do?
TheRealPaulMueller.org and all the social media channels at TheRealPaulMueller, all one word. You know, it never stops. It really never stops. And people ask me, you know, why do you do it? Because I love standing up for these innocent victims. I really do. And I think more and more of us need to, just like people do for the victims of child sex crimes.
Yeah, absolutely great work. As always, Paul Mueller, thanks for being with us here on Law&Crime.
Chris, good to see you.
That will do it for On the Case, presented by Law&Crime. Subscribe to us on YouTube and Spotify. I'm Chris Stewart. We'll see you next time.